It's going to really mess with your sense of who you are in the world, no matter who you are in the world. And like to me, it is like your one line on yesbroadway.com is OMG, 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 this play will F you up. And I don't know Lenny, but I have a feeling this would not pass the Lenny test. And it would also not pass the like, it's the holidays, we're gonna treat ourselves to a Broadway show night on the town, but in a totally different way, like it's not for the casual theater goer, but it's also like the exact opposite of a classic musical.
Correct. Well, there's still very much a stigma on theater in outside of the theater world. Like you go to Williamsburg and go to a bar, like the idea of going to Broadway isn't something that those people think is for them. They're like, no, I don't necessarily want jazz hands or singer dancing, or if I'm going to see a play, I may as well watch a movie, whatever it may be.
They also think it's like only for the super, 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 super rich.
Right. Or, that it's just all singing and dancing. That's, what you imagine like 42nd Street, the musical to be. And so whether it's Slave Play, whether it's Dear Evan Hansen or Hamilton or Be More Chill or a show that, has a little bit more mass appeal or for musicals, I think the key is the music sort of contemporary and kind of radio ready. And that's the, problem with a lot of musicals where like if you don't like show tunes, you're not going to like a lot of musicals. But there are lots of musicals that don't have really show tunesy type music or music that at least skews towards, more radio ready pop music. For plays, I actually think Slave Play would pass the Lenny test with flying colors. Here's why. Because a show like Slave Play, at the very least, you walk out of that theater saying, whoa, theater can do really crazy and wild things to you and your brain, and your reaction to it can happen. I think when a non-theater person thinks of plays, they think of, maybe Tennessee Williams or really even Shakespeare. And so they don't know that like we can tell these extremely modern, compelling, riveting stories that F you up. And so I think that it does fall into that category of short. Now, listen, it's funny you brought up the example of Slave Play because I was at a wedding a couple months ago, and it was one of my friends who's from Tennessee, and her Tennessee friends were in town, and I was chatting with them at the wedding, and they were like, we have our day free tomorrow in New York City. What should we do? And I was like, well, I know the exact answer to that question. It's Broadway. And they were like, what should we see? And they kind of heard a little bit about Slave Play. I think they had looked around at Broadway shows. And I had this
It is definitely hype alert.
I had a very long discussion with them about should this be your first Broadway show, because they had never seen one before. And so like
wow.
There's so many reasons why I think it could and should be their first Broadway show, and there's also so many reasons why it's also just like this very intense standalone thing that maybe isn't the best first Broadway show ever.
It's like the first time I've seen a show that I appreciated so much that I like never wanted to see again.
Got it.
You want a show, like I will go back and see, like I mentioned with Waitress, I'll see a show 20 times. I've actually there's one show that I've crossed the 20 mark on, and I often don't talk about it because people get mad at me.
What
but
is it?
Hamilton.
Wow, over 20. Wow.
Yeah, I've seen it 22 times, and I've seen it in 4 cities.
I'm 10, and I thought I was really high upper echelon, but you're double than me.
Well, it's because I've interviewed like every cast member, and I won't do an interview with somebody on a project I haven't seen them in.
Yep.
So often what happens is I get snuck in and I stand in the back so that I can study a performance before I do the interview. But then also, like, I happened to be in Chicago a few weeks ago, and I plunked down $300 for a ticket because the Chicago company was closing, or like I got invited to opening night in Puerto Rico, which was a huge deal. Yeah. But I also had to fly. So the ticket was comped. Amazing. But I had to fly myself there and put myself up. It was not cheap. Anyway, but Slave Play I actually did see more than once. I saw it downtown.
Yeah.
And I saw it again on Broadway. And I got invited to see it a third time. And I declined because it effed me up so much that my privilege is that I was able to decide not to be uncomfortable. And that is something that like the people not being articulate about it, but I am aware of the fact that there is a discomfort that many people and marginalized groups walk around with on a daily basis that I have the privilege of opting out of. And maybe I should have gone to see Slave Play a third time just to make myself feel that discomfort and be reminded for empathy's sake. Anyway, I'm on a tangent.
My favorite
I do
thing,
think everybody should see it.
I agree. And my favorite thing, I saw it downtown as well, off Broadway, and then when I saw it on Broadway for the second time, my favorite thing was actually just watching the audience for the first 45 minutes, because without spoiling anything, like, you know, it takes a while into Slave Play before sort of what's happening is revealed. And until that point, you know, the audience come back to me and say, Sam, you're a white guy. Like, you don't get like how traumatizing it is for even just to watch that show. And I would say, oh, wow. Like I of course didn't think about that. That was just me like existing in this like, you know, privileged mindset of like, for me, it's fascinating to watch the uncomfortable reactions in that theater. But knowing, you know, that it's making a lot of people actually uncomfortable, and it's really messing with them, is a different story. But I do think it's an incredibly important piece of theater, and to be honest, one of the best written plays of modern times.
I agree. Jeremy O. Harris, he also did a show called Daddy that like I loved. Also made me uncomfortable, but like yay for theater that makes us feel things.
And yay for Jeremy O. Harris re-entering that, or helping us re-enter this world where playwrights and Broadway stars can be so much part of the pop culture zeitgeist.
Totally.
Like, he is my favorite Twitter follow of all time. Like, I feel like I should change my Twitter bio to my job is liking Jeremy O. Harris's tweets, just because I don't think I've seen one that I haven't liked in the past like 6 months. I am obsessed with him. I'm obsessed with the way he has just blazed onto the scene. And I think that's an incredible part of it too, that like, you know, a lot of people are, even people who are very affected by Slave Play specifically, but just like him and what he's doing is incredible. I mean, when is the last time a playwright was on the cover of magazines?
I mean, only Lin.
Yeah.
Lin-Manuel Miranda.
So like Jeremy O. Harris, for that reason alone, is also just like my hero of the decade.
Well, so this show is live right now on dnrstudios.com/Laura. I love that people listen live. The fact is, you have to pay to listen live, and not everybody can pay to listen live. We all have so many streaming services in our lives. So the vast majority of people hearing this hear the free version. It was really important to me that there be a free version, and that goes out on podcast platforms a week later. So if you're listening on a free podcast platform, you only have a few days left to see Slave Play because it's actually shuttering. It was extended. I don't think it was ever meant to be a long-running show, but please do try to see it, because it is an experience that I think you're just going to want to, it's going to be part of the conversation about American theater for a long time to come. And that brings us to what else is coming up and what shows are going to be the ones that, like, I'm proud to say that I saw Slave Play downtown, and there are going to be other shows that come in that we're going to want to be on the cutting edge of. You don't want to wait till the reviews come out, because the reviews come out and then tickets are sold. If it's good reviews, the tickets sell out.
Right.
So
you can't be the person who says, I saw Hamilton downtown, if you don't go see several potential Hamiltons downtown.
Right. Yeah. You kind of have to, but you also can't see every single play. I mean, I remember thinking after Spring Awakening, which I saw the original production between 14 and 18 times. I lived around the corner, and I would like walk past and be like, do you have anything for tonight? And I remember being heartbroken that I hadn't seen it at the Atlantic Theater, and I could never go back and get that experience again. And so I immediately bought a membership to the Atlantic Theater, thinking that everything that they did was going to be like Spring Awakening and was going to transfer to Broadway, and I would get to see it all before it moved there. And I went, they had a new musical, and I can't even remember what it was, but I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be like, I'm going to discover the next Spring Awakening. And the experience kind of fell flat. Mm-hmm. But I stayed a member of the Atlantic Theater. It's my like local neighborhood theater. And I have seen like Secret Life of Bees, I feel like could be a real hit on the big stage. And Found, the musical, which I should say I'm an investor in, so I'm a little bit biased, but like Found is having its LA premiere this year.
Oh, cool.
And I don't have any information beyond that. I'm not a big enough investor that I'm involved in conversations about the future in ways the public is not. But I will say that the fact that it's still alive and may have a future.
I loved that show so much.
Oh my gosh. Well, can you put it in hype alert, please?
Yeah,
Because
sure.
it does. I mean, you do have an LA section where you
Yeah.
have some LA features. It's being produced at I Am a Theater, which is Katie Lowe's from Scandal and her husband Adam Shapiro, who co-starred in Waitress together as Ogie and Dawn.
Oh,
It's
cute.
their theater company
Cool.
that's doing it, and anyway, tangent.
Cool. I love
The
Found.
point is, not everything off Broadway makes it to Broadway, and there are hundreds and hundreds of shows coming into town that it's impossible to see everything. And I say this as somebody who in 2018 saw 275 theater
Oh, wow.
productions.
I saw 270 in 2018, I think.
Ugh. I
Maybe
couldn't do it in
2019.
2019.
Me either.
I dipped under 200.
I think I did too. Just because I was at Be More Chill every night.
Right, that's right. And I went on tour with Todrick Hall for 6 weeks, so
Yeah.
I saw Hamilton when I was in Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw Anastasia in Spanish when I was in Spain, which was like incredible.
I will say I actually have enjoyed it being slimmed down because
Me
there was
too.
a point when in 2018, I think it was, when I think that was the year I also saw 270, 280, something like that, where I remember, I mean, especially those Broadway openings that in April that are just like literally every night. I remember, well, first of all, I remember not being able to, waking up in the morning and not being able to remember what I saw last night or not knowing what I was seeing that night.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be like major, big Broadway musicals
Yeah.
I was very excited about. That was just like, I have no idea.
Still, people say to me, like, what have you seen lately? And I'm like, I don't know. I need to
Yeah.
look back at my calendar.
And I will say that when it slowed down a lot because of Be More Chill and other reasons, now when I go there, it is a lot easier to appreciate something because I'm not so burned out. That being said, you know,
It's like loving ice cream and getting a job in an ice cream shop and having all you want and making yourself sick.
Yep.
I don't know that either one of us is sick of it, but sometimes you just like need to take a step back from the ice cream
yeah.
and eat it like 3 times a week
Yeah.
or 4 times a week instead of 3 meals a day.
The time I remember it really hitting ahead was Denzel Washington, The Iceman Cometh, which was an incredible production. Denzel Washington is Denzel Washington. I had an incredible seat. It was actually an opening night I got to go. Normally I'm on press nights a few nights before I get to go. And I remember that was in the middle of 17 nights with 15 shows or something. And I remember 10 minutes in being like, okay, got it. He's awesome. This is a good production. I know what I need to know for the Tonys. I know what I need to know to recommend the show to people or not. And then I had to sit through 2 hours and 50 minutes of the rest of it, even though it was incredible.
I've heard from so many people about Iceman, and I was riveted the entire time.
I wasn't riveted the whole time, but I knew that I would have been if I hadn't seen
if you had the
15
energy.
shows. And that was when it really did, when I knew that Denzel Washington is speaking O'Neill into my face, basically. I had like an incredible seat. It was like right there in front of me. And I was like, my brain couldn't even process it. I was like,
to me, that show was all about David Morse, who was the barkeep, like sort of narrator character. And I think that I was really engaged with him because I was interviewing him. And so even when Denzel Washington was on stage, I was watching David Morse, who is one of those that guy guys. Like, he's done a million things. You've seen him in everything. He's been nominated for a few Tonys, but he has this chameleon-like face and acting skill where you'd be like, oh, yeah, that guy, but you might not know his name. Anyway, I was focused so much on him that I felt like I got a masterclass in acting in a supportive, literally, role where he was engaged and the way he listened to the other characters.
That's
anyway,
cool.
Listen, we've been talking for almost half an hour, and we haven't touched on the 2 things I want to touch on, which is, 1, what's coming up, and 2, influencer marketing, what that is, and how you've sort of again, found this intersection of things you're good at and reinvented the industry based on something that only you could do. So I've been teasing, or we've been leading up to what's coming up, so I want to make sure to get to that. So let's start there. We in the industry talk about the season, which is basically between Tony Awards.
Right.
I think
April through April.
Yeah, it's
or
April
May through April.
It's not a lot opens between Tony nominations and the awards, just because the industry is so focused on
Which
the
is
awards.
basically end of April, Tony nominations, beginning of June awards. So May is sort of like this time when nothing new is opening. It's just people voting on the nominated shows.
There are exceptions, but so basically this year, 2020, the Tony nominations will be announced on April 28th, which I know because that's my birthday.
Ooh, cool.
So I'm going to be getting up early and starting my
I always
birthday
know it's
with
around
nominations.
April
Right.
26th, 28th because Rent opened on April 26th, 1996, or April 28th, I think. One of those two. And I always know that they were like barely making the cutoff
Right.
because of their move from downtown. So I always know it's April 20th.
Something,
Yeah.
yeah. It's at the end of April. It's been as late as like May 1st or 2nd.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this year it's April 28th. That's the cutoff. That's the day the nominations are announced. So technically a show could open on April 27th and still qualify for the 2020 Tony Awards. If a show opened on April 29th of this year, then it would be eligible for the 2021 season, which will be the 2021 Tony Awards. I feel like I didn't do a great job of explaining that, but hopefully you get the point. Anyway, the awards focus on the season, which is like basically
May through April.
April to April. What we are talking about now is the actual calendar year. One of the things that was a little bit confusing for me was looking at these end of year lists and seeing shows that were eligible for the 2019 Tonys. Because they don't feel like they were this year, like a show that opened in January. So it is January. It's the beginning of January, first show, January. We're going to talk about what shows we are likely to see on the Best of Broadway lists at the end of 2020. So some of these shows will be eligible for the Tony Awards this June, and some of them will be eligible for the Tony Awards the following June. But what they have in common is they will be opening in
The calendar
year of 2020. And I want to talk about both Broadway and off-Broadway. And, of course, there's a lot more off-Broadway than Broadway, but Broadway's the big ones. And some of them we already know a lot about. For example, the very first show to open on Broadway in 2020 will be The Girl from the North Country.
Did you see it downtown?
I saw it downtown, baby, and
too.
I'm proud of it.
Yeah, me
at
too.
the Public Theater. This is the music and lyrics are by Bob Dylan. It's a lot of songs that you might recognize, but a lot that you might not. He has such a deep catalog. And
I mean, for me, it was also lots of songs that I just didn't know were Bob Dylan songs.
Oh yeah, interesting. But I will say that they are orchestrated and curated in a way that they do not sound like Bob Dylan. They sound like, and they don't sound like da 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 da. Hey, show tunes either. But it has like a Hadestown-esque folk.
Yeah, I would say
musical
maybe my
storytelling
opinion of it
feel.
is a little more like it's a little more poetic and a little more
Bob
like
Dylan is a
poemish.
he's a
I
poet.
feel like it falls in that category. The Hades Town falls into as well, where it's like where a lot of musicals could be equated to a novel. The Band's Visit was like a poem.
Oh,
And I feel like The Girl from the North Country is this too, where it's a little sleepy, but that's kind of a lovely thing. Where it's like a little bit cloudy, like it's like what Rachel Chavkin says for Hadestown, where the camera is unfocused a little bit. It's like a little bit of a
I was
dreamlike
thinking
state.
it's like a sepia-toned
Yep.
photograph instead of a brightly colored, beautifully lit, perfectly filtered Instagram shot.
So
it's like a
Maher Winningham stars in the she's the 80s movie star. She was in St. Elsewhere, I think, or St. Elmo's Fire. Incredible. She's so incredible in this. And off Broadway, off Broadway, it was a former or a current Hamilton George Washington. And for Broadway, that role is played by Austin Scott, who is a Hamilton, like an Alexander Hamilton.
Wait, Sidney James Harcourt isn't coming back?
No, he's the that's the Austin Scott role, I think.
That's interesting. Didn't know that.
Yeah, Sidney James Harcourt was a Washington, right?
Yeah.
So it's funny that role is played by someone who was in Hamilton.
Well, basically, like everybody is. There have been so many people in Hamilton now because there have been so many touring casts and so many replacements, and basically Hamilton is digging deep into the the files of casting offices to find these incredible, like every diamond in the rough is coming up through Hamilton because Hamilton is doing the mining for these diamonds. And it's basically like an incubator, I feel like.
Cool. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not surprised. But I am sorry that Sidney James Harcourt isn't coming back.
Maybe it's for, some great reason. Maybe he's playing Hamilton on one of the tours or something like that. Or
I'm sure he's doing something incredible.
About to become a big movie star. And Austin Scott, I never saw him as Hamilton, but he's very easy on the eyes. I follow him on Instagram.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited to stare at him for 2.5 hours in The Girl from the North Country. He's very tall.
He's a Bay Area guy. He's from my neck of the woods in California.
I've never met him, but on Instagram he does seem like such a great dude.
Well, we'll have to schedule some
Austin Scott time.
Some Austin Scott.
So the next show to open after we go from North Country is the one probably that I'm most excited about in all of 2026.
Okay, so 6 is, tell us about 6. But first I'm going to say, I have never had to work so hard to keep something out of my ear holes as 6. I have not listened to it. I did not see it out of town. There's something about the experience I had with Hamilton where, because I saw it at the Public, I didn't know really what it was. I'd heard the White House performance, but there was something about experiencing it live in real time on stage for the first time that was so magical. And I know that I'm going to get to see 6 early on in the Broadway run, and I just want to have the fresh, full experience.
I'm in the same boat, except for I did get to go to their influencer hype event, which was 2 songs, I think, which makes me feel like I do know at least like what it is from seeing that, and from seeing that I can tell you it's.
But you haven't listened to the album?
Nope.
So
Slade, my boyfriend, has, and it's been on sometimes in the car, but rarely. Like
what? So what is it? How do you say that you're that excited about something that you know so little about?
I'll tell you the answer to that question, which is people who I know who saw it in London came out of it. I think there's a very clear line of Twitter reactions and people who see shows that say things like, it was great, I loved it, it was awesome, versus the people say, it was one of my favorite things I've ever seen. And I had several people I had several friends who I knew who saw it in London who came out not saying, this was great, this was awesome, but like, this was one of the best, coolest, favorite things I've ever seen. And to me, the shows that fall into that category are just like hype, because there's a very good chance that it's going to be extremely good. Even if I, let's say randomly, personally don't fall in the category of someone who loves it as much as that person or think it's one of my favorite things I've seen ever, the fact that people are saying that versus it's just good or great or I had a good time.
So what are some other shows that fell into that category other than Hamilton? Dear Evan Hansen?
Dear Evan Hansen, had that hype coming in. Be More Chill certainly had that hype coming in. All the ones you think about that are like these sort of young, cool pop culture moments, like Spring Awakening, Next to Normal. Rent had that happen. Rent sort of invented that happening, I feel like, in 1996.
I'm wearing my Rent shirt today, by the way.
And I feel like also people don't know how crazy it is that they transferred to Broadway in that season. Now that people know the dates of the season, I mean, Rent first preview off Broadway, I think, was late January, maybe February 1st or something. To be able to coordinate a Broadway transfer that quickly and get there by opening night, which was April 26th, is the feat that I still don't even process in my mind. I mean, they had one thing going for them, which is that the Nederlander was not used and completely out of like commission, and they were like, great, we want it. We're just gonna put some neon green paint everywhere, and it's ready.
Yeah, well, their whole set was like scaffolding.
Yeah,
and
it was like you were supposed to feel like you were in this dilapidated old theater. They also loved the fact that the theater was the most downtown theater physically. It was on 41st Street, so like they had that going for them. But
they also had a fire under their asses because they wanted to, like, because of the legacy of Jonathan Larson.
Yep.
And I think that everybody, the No Day But Today message of that show was like seared into everyone's motivation, and they needed to, like, I don't want to say they had that going for them, because what a horrific, like,
right, but that momentum was there.
Yeah,
and
momentum is a good
But, that Rent sort of invented that. And I think, a lot of the shows over the past 20 years, 30 years that have had that, have that same sort of tingling where people know, even just from the buzz that's being built or the buzz that's happening around the show from an out-of-town tryout or an off-Broadway run. And Six has that in spades. The one thing I'll say about Six...
Will you say the plot of, or the concept of Six?
Yeah, so as far as I understand it, it's basically like a Spice Girls-ish moment, like a Spice Girls just type group, but they are Henry VIII's wives who are all beheaded. So the tagline of the show is divorced, beheaded, live on Broadway. So it's very pop concert-ish. And I think you can learn a lot of history because it's Henry VIII's wives and like Catherine of Aragon and I don't know all their names, so like they each have their moment.
I think a bunch of them's names are Anne.
Yes, I do think that's true. But there's 6 of them, and they perform group numbers. I think they each have their own solos as well, sort of telling their story. And, the one thing I'll say about Six, and one of the reasons why maybe it's not necessarily poised to win Best Musical, even though it's the show that's coming in with the most hype, is because it does seem like it's more of a very theatrical concert more than like a traditional musical.
Is it 2 acts, do you know?
No, it's very short. I think it's 70, maybe 90 minutes.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's going to make people... It's funny because you think that for spending $150 to $300 a ticket, people would want to get the most for their money.
Right.
But there's nothing like a 75, 90-minute show that people can go
especially one that exists in sort of a realm that works for non-theater people who are used to seeing concerts, not Broadway shows. Like, I don't think Six will be a situation where you pull out your phone, but it's at least like, it's going to be easier to hoop and holler and shout with your friends and scream. And probably, I'm imagining the standing ovation at Six is like, everybody's standing like at this like at Tina, and it's basically a Tina Turner concert at the end of Tina the musical.
Yeah, or Summer, where everyone's dancing.
Right, I would imagine Six is sort of like that.
I actually haven't seen Tina yet.
Oh my God, Tina is Adrienne Warren, and Tina is probably got to be in my top 5 best performances of the decade.
Wow,
like she is unbelievable.
Do you count that as last decade or this decade?
Last decade. Like I usually go for when I saw a show.
Right. Yeah. Well, and of course,
if
it would be hard to call your top 5 performances of the decade that started 6 days ago.
Right.
Because you haven't seen anybody else.
Oh, you mean of the last decade. Right.
Right. Well,
but
we
even
just
like,
came to the close of a decade.
SpongeBob opened in December 2018. And so, and I'm the world's biggest SpongeBob the Musical fan. It was on my top 10 list of 2018. And so it was very weird that all of a sudden, their big glorious moments in 2019 where they were nominated for Tonys and Ethan was nominated for a Tony
and then they were on TV.
Was like much later. Whereas, 6 months ago, it was already, top on my my favorite theater of 2018 list.
By the way, my sister is flying in for opening night of Six. Like
Six is going to be a moment in Broadway history.
I knew that.
It's
I was like,
awesome.
When I found out that I was going to get to go and sit in the audience on opening night, my sister was the only person I could imagine coming with me, and I was like, we're gonna hire hair and makeup, we're gonna like get somebody to, I don't know, we may go to like Rent the Runway or something. Because it's going to be
an event.
It's going to be an event.
Yep.
What else are you excited about? Well, look, I'm taking this one.
Okay.
I can't wait for Company.
Great.
Company's a transfer from London. It's they call it like a gender bending kind of gender swapped. The most important thing is this is a classic Stephen Sondheim musical. There was a revival in 2007 at the Barrymore that Raul Esparza starred in that I saw like 6 or 7 times. That was right after I had like right after Spring Awakening gave birth to Broadway Girl. And again, I lived very close by, and I would go buy Rush tickets, which were in the first row. And I was like, this show, as somebody who's like single and living in New York, just broke my heart, broke me down. And now the lead, Bobby, is going to be played not by Raul Esparza or another man, but by Katrina Lenk, the Tony winner from The Band's Visit. And Patti LuPone is going to be playing Joanne.
Which is the Ladies Who Lunch song. The very that's the famous song from that show, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, like you hear somebody go, does anybody still wear a hat? This is famous Elaine Stritch role. And just the cast is a bunch of my favorite people on
Oh
and
my God.
off stage. Everybody from Bobby Conte Thornton, who is the lead in Bronx Tale, who's like a dear friend of mine, Etai Benson, who was in the band's Visit, Nikki Renee Daniels, who just slayed in The Wrong Man, Chris Sieber, who was in The Prom, Chris Fitzgerald nominated for a Tony for Waitress, Matt Doyle, who was in Spring Awakening and who I camped out overnight to see his first appearance as
Love him.
Melchior. So he's been on my radar a long time.
Wow.
He was also one of the leads in Bye Bye Birdie, and he's just done a million things since. So and Claiborne Elder, who is one of these guys who's just been doing this.
He's in everything. He was in the Book of Mormon, I think, for a long time.
I think you're thinking that because his last name is Elder.
No, I feel like he was. Maybe not.
But he was.
If that's what happened, then my brain is completely rewired to be Broadway at this point.
I'm gonna look it up.
That's funny. Fun
Then
fact,
he would have been Elder.
Interesting fact. I am surprisingly uneducated and unexperienced with Sondheim. It's a major scandal in my life that I am a Broadway influencer, that I have a Broadway media company, that I know way more than the average person about Broadway, and I barely know anything about Sondheim
So
musicals.
I say lean into this because I also have major blind spots, and mine happen to be things that opened before 2006 and have not had revivals. Like the only reason I know about Pal Joey is because there was a Pal Joey revival within my my time as of caring. But I think I love saying to people, I'm not an encyclopedia. I'm a human being. We all have blind spots, and I'm always excited to learn. By the way, Claiborne Elder was never in the Book of Mormon. He's been in Bonnie and Clyde, Sunday in the Park with George, Torch Song, and Now Company.
I'm coming. You're right. It's because his last name is Elder. I bet that's why I thought that.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
So
he also has a baby whose name is also Claiborne, who I call Claiborne Younger.
Oh, that's good.
Because
That's a good name to have. So if I was named Claiborne, I would probably name my son Claiborne as well. But Sondheim in general for me, I know Into the Woods fairly well. Sunday in the Park with George on Broadway with Jake Gyllenhaal and Annalee Ashford was one of several moments I've had in the past 10, 15 years where I say, okay, Sam, you know nothing about Sondheim. You've never really been into him. It never really happened for me. Sondheim never really got me in the gut. And here's the thing. Everyone whose opinion I respect is the world's biggest Sondheim fan. Mm-hmm. Including Jonathan Larson, including Joe Iconis, including every musical theater person ever.
You can include me.
I feel like I wasn't getting something. I feel like I was being left out on something that I just didn't get. So I remember Into the Woods, the movie, coming out in the movie theater, and me saying, okay, I'm giving Sondheim a whole nother chance again, because the last thing in the world I'm going to do is say I don't like Sondheim because it hasn't happened to me yet. I'm going to stay open to this for as long as I live. And I remember Into the Woods, the movie, saying I'm going to stay very open to this. And I love the opening number to In the Woods, and then the rest is just sort of musically, it doesn't really happen for me. I like it. It's pleasant. It's just not something that I feel I want to pull up the cast recording of Into the Woods and listen to anything but the opening number. But the one time it kind of did happen, and this is so interesting. Sunday in the Park with George with Jake Gyllenhaal and Annalee Ashford on Broadway. I was in the mezzanine, and the show happened, and of course you're watching Jake Gyllenhaal and Annalee Ashford perform this incredible musical. So of course I was like, "Yep, this is wonderful and pleasant, and I dig it." And at the end, I was still I still don't really get Sondheim, but I was in the mezzanine, and I walked down the stairs with the crowd, and I started weeping. And I was like, oh my God, I think my Sondheim moment is happening. I think I'm getting it. I think I got it. And so I will always cherish that. And that's why, for that reason, and the fact that every single person whose opinion I respect is obsessed with Sondheim, is the reason why I will be open for the rest of my life, including and especially for company. It's not easy to convince me to also be very excited about Katrina Lenk. Seeing Patti LuPone do The Ladies Who Lunch is something that
Wait, did you say you're not excited?
No, that I am.
Oh, okay. You
Meaning,
used some double negatives.
Meaning, even if I didn't... even if I didn't have this weird Sondheim not getting it thing, of course, even just with Katrina Lenk alone performing a lead role in a musical on Broadway, I would watch her read the phone book. Patti LuPone singing Ladies Who Lunch is obviously going to be a highlight of the Broadway season for every single person who gets to see that. And, all these other people on the show who I love Matt Doyle and Etai Benson, who, secret fact, is in my top 5 Broadway crushes of all time. I think Itai Benson is the
cutest.
Oh my god.
He's like my forever Bach from Wicked. He's like to me that he's the quintessential that
He's so
type.
cute it makes me uncomfortable.
Oh, I know. He doesn't make me uncomfortable, but he is so cute. I'm going to give you a confession to match yours.
Okay.
First of all, I say I don't approve of people expecting everybody to like the same stuff. I believe that you can like whatever you want. That's what's great about art. Nobody likes everything. It's sort of the equivalent of like the fact that I don't really care that much about chocolate. I know that chocolate is like the greatest food in the whole world, blah, blah, blah. I think it's fine. I don't love it. It doesn't tempt me when it's around. I have my own things like onion rings that I cannot. It's not that I'm super healthy. It's just that that's just not the thing for me.
Yeah.
But Sondheim is like the chocolate of
musical theater.
Of musical theater. But I don't. Am I going to say it out loud? I try really, really, really hard to like Shakespeare. And it just isn't for me. It's not for me.
I don't mind saying at all that I just can't and won't and don't.
I don't think he's bad.
Oh, I don't either. It's just like...
And there's no questioning the influence.
Yeah.
But, okay, so I hate to cut this off. In fact, let's just quickly go down other shows we're excited about.
I'm very curious about Flying Over Sunset, which is going to be at Lincoln Center Theater. It is written by Tom Kitt and Michael Corey, who I remember him. He wrote something, but I can't remember what it was. Directed by James Lapine or Lapine?
Lapine.
It's starring Carmen Cusack. So, like, all of these things conspire to be like, this is definitely something I'm going to be very excited to go see and find out what it's about and what the whole deal. Oh, and it focuses on LSD. So cool. Like, sign me up basically for this. It could obviously, go either way, but like this to me, I'm ready and excited to sit at the Vivian Beaumont Theater on the press night and see the show. Like, it sounds like it could be really awesome.
The one that I am probably the most excited about is the Broadway premiere of a play that I fell in love with more than 20 years ago called How I Learned to Drive. It was a play that Paula Vogel, that put Paula Vogel on my map. It starred 20 years after. It started in 1997 off Broadway. It starred Mary Louise Parker and David Morse, who I just mentioned as like one of my favorite actors of all time. He was an Iceman, and they are returning 20 years later to reprise the roles. And this is not a comfortable play. It's a play about a problematic relationship between a young girl and her uncle, and to revisit it now, I think, is so perfect that you think, what is Mary Louise Parker doing playing a young girl? But we are all grappling with our Me Too experiences that happened 20 years ago or 30 years ago or 1 year ago or whatever. But so many of us who are in the age bracket of Mary Louise Parker are looking back at our teens and going, oh, maybe that thing that felt really special and intimate with someone in my life who had this position of power over me, maybe that wasn't okay after all. And How I Learned to Drive might be, that play and Equus were the two plays that I read over and over and over and over again and made me decide to be a theater major and made me see that theater could tap into this dark part of my soul that I wasn't even really comfortable expressing, but I felt like watching these works was expressing it for me.
Awesome.
And holding me up. So the fact that it is both long overdue and perfectly timed to bring How I Learned to Drive to Broadway.
Love.
Get tickets to that one like ASAP.
And Paula Vogel is like one of my favorite humans ever. So
I know.
For that
Isn't she?
reason,
She is the nicest.
She's the greatest human ever.
Sam.
Yes.
What is influencer marketing?
Great question. Influencer marketing has existed in every other industry for the past 5, 7, maybe even 10 years. This is what you see when you see like Casper mattresses getting, these influencers to say, I love my Casper mattress, #ad.
Are they paying you?
Casper mattress?
Yeah.
No. But
The fact that you would mention them as like because they are so ubiquitous.
They're ubiquitous.
You know,
and
I'm not mentioning them till they start paying me.
It's how people find out about things these days. Is through your influencers or people that you follow on social media, them talking about products. And a lot of times it's paid and sponsored. A lot of times it's not. Chrissy Teigen loves to tweet all the time about, I promise I'm not being paid to say this. This thing I love, love, love. So for Broadway, I decided let's try this. And it started with Be More Chill, which is a show that lends itself perfectly to that sort of model of like letting influencers introduce the show to their audiences. And it works a lot like a press agent does and a press allotment. A show will pay me and give me an allotment of tickets and say, fill those seats with influencers, and let's hope that those influencers post about seeing the show. Now, the first question a lot of people have is, do they have to be paid? And the answer is no, because these influencers, know that they're getting, a pretty good value. Usually it's $300 worth of Broadway tickets, $250 seats. But also because they're often not theater influencers. These are, lifestyle, food, travel, streetwear, fashion influencers. They're so excited to have content that's not what they normally have.
It offers an opportunity for intersection. If you put a fashion blogger in there and they talk about like how amazing Lauren Patton is dressed in Jagged Little Pill, then that gives them a different kind of content than just who was on the red carpet.
Or even if they just say,
night.
like, I'm being cultured and going out and experiencing Broadway. I live in New York, and it's this cultural institution that exists here, and I only think of it as Phantom of the Opera or Chicago for tourists at the TKTS booth, but you get them to Jagged Little Pill, and whether they're talking about Lauren Patton's clothes or not, they're talking about Lauren Patton and how incredible the show is, and boom, all of a sudden, Jagged Little Pill, the brand, is in front of tens of thousands of potential ticket buyers that they weren't able to reach before, through the typical ways of like putting an ad in Times Square or putting the ads on top of taxi tops. It's basically just like, the logo and the key art versus an influencer saying, even an influencer saying, I'm here induces FOMO.
Well, totally.
So they don't have to review it or say that's good or I liked it or anything. All they have to do is show that playbill photo that you see all the time of them with their playbill with the set behind them before the show starts. And boom, their audience wants so badly to be in it and participate in that experience.
I think that it's also important that you don't actually require that they post anything.
Well, we didn't know at the beginning if they would, and it turns out, 2,000 influencers, 20 shows later, that the average rate of posting is around 97%. So, pretty much everyone posts. I mean, oftentimes it's an Instagram story, but any of us who have a Instagram account that is, branded and for professional reasons knows that Instagram stories is where the most eyes see content anyway. So even though, it feels a little more ephemeral and is gone after 24 hours, it's actually where the most branding power can happen on Instagram stories.
Well, I'll tell you, I get a lot of asks to go to things and to post things. And my thing is, if you're going to invite me and let me do whatever I want, then I will almost always say yes, and I will almost always post about it. But if you're going to require me to post about it, then you need to pay me in advance.
I agree. And, one of the number one things I've learned with influencer marketing in general for Broadway shows or in general is influencers are content creators and they know their audience. That's why they're so big. It's because they've really figured out what their audience responds to, and most importantly, what their audience doesn't respond to. And so they know what to say or not to say. And anytime a brand tries to give them things to say or wants them to do it in a certain way, it's commercial. It should be paid for, but even then it shouldn't be. To be honest, I even feel like sponsored content campaigns where a brand is paying an influencer to say something needs to also just say, here's the money, here's in general the thing.
Yeah, like here's some hashtags we're working with.
Go for it, because that's going to be the best result. So
I agree.
I've seen a lot of success with Broadway shows doing influencer marketing, and it's sort of like a few years ago it was social media took over, and now it's influencer marketing. So it's sort of this new way to get a show's brand out into the world and reach a whole new audience.
Sam, people can follow you at Be More Sam and follow Yes Broadway at Yes Broadway on all the platforms. Your website is yesbroadway.com. You're one of my favorite people. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks
this
so
is
much
Laura
for
Heywood
having
Interviews.
me. Bye.
3 minutes to showtime.